Hello! In first part of this guide to engagement and wedding a Ukrainian, Russian or any Slavic girl by a foreign man, I started to explain whether or not you should buy an engagement ring if you plan to marry a Ukrainian, Russian or any Slavic lady. I also talked about how people in Soviet Union got married, how my parents, my grandparents and even my great-grandparents got married. Did they have any engagement rings, wedding rings, wedding dresses, wedding parties, and how they got married actually. If you haven't watched the first part of this series, please watch it right here. In this video I will show you a so-called sacred ceremony of wedding in church in Ukraine, Russia, Belarus and some other Slavic countries. If you planned, or maybe if your future wife plans to have such sacred ceremony in church in Ukraine, Russia or other Slavic countries, at least you know what to be prepared for and whether you actually want it or not. After all, this special sacred wedding ceremony in church is just an addition to an official wedding ceremony that takes place in registry office, and which is of course not necessary at all. Before we get started, please check if you are subscribed to my channel, and if you are not subscribed, please subscribe to it and hit that bell button to get notifications of my future videos. I would also appreciate if you like this video if you really like it, and maybe share it in social media so that more people get this useful information. Enough of words, let's get started. Let's talk about engagement in general in Ukraine and Russia these days. In big cities and in many small cities, almost nobody ever cared about engagement at all. Man just makes a proposition to a girl in words and sometimes asks for blessing from his parents and parents of the girl. But in maybe 50% of cases, even blessing is not asked for. So just makes a proposition, girl replies yes, and they go to that registry office. In Soviet Union, it was like a tradition for a man to ask for blessing from his parents as well as from parents of the girl, but not anymore. When man asks these days a girl to become his wife, they usually go to some restaurant or go to vacation abroad and try to make this moment as romantic as possible. If one of families is religious, or maybe if two families are religious, they would want to also be married in church. And we have a special word which is not actually marriage. The word is венчание, and it can be translated as wedding in church. Like in your case, it can only be if the girl that you meet is religious or if her family is religious. If you happen to marry a religious girl or a girl from religious family, let me show you what you should expect from this венчание, wedding ceremony in church. If wedding ceremony in church is of no interest to you, please fast forward. I will put here a time code where to fast forward. But if one of money-wasting ceremonies are interesting to you, keep watching, will be interesting. You see a couple that is getting married in church, and such ceremony in church can take place only after they have married officially in that registry office. This венчание, the so-called wedding or maybe engagement ceremony in church, is not very popular in the big cities these days. Maybe about 5% of couples, or maybe less than 5%, decide to have this ceremony. However, in villages, this ceremony is pretty popular. And simply because in villages people are much less educated, and many sincerely believe that if they get married in church, their wedding and their family will be very, very happy and will be really blessed with God. The whole ceremony is about 1 to 1.5 hours usually. We have cut out those parts that are less interesting. My opinion is that all this ceremony is not interesting, but you will see the most interesting parts of this not interesting ceremony. Just keep watching and I will explain the most important parts of this ceremony. If you look carefully, it is not even interesting for these people who came here to have this ceremony in church. Simply look at these faces. Look at the faces of the bride and the groom. Do you see any happiness? They are just standing there and thinking, oh, when will this be over? When can we get back home and have a very nice lunch, dinner and celebration with alcohol? When will all this procedure be over? Just look at those faces and you will understand everything yourself. Watch this part very carefully. They will be exchanging with wedding rings now. These are wedding rings, not engagement rings. They have been to an official registry office where they exchanged rings and got married. Then they came to a church, they took those rings off, gave them to the priest, and now priest tells them what to do because they have no idea what to do now. They exchange rings 3 times and priest guides them what to do. And he tells them, so you exchange these rings 3 times, and from this moment you are like wife and husband until the end of your life. Look at the faces of bride and the groom. Do you see any happiness? I don't, or maybe it is happiness without smile. Please write in comments what do you think about it. After they exchange rings, priest asks in ancient Russian language. He asks the groom, have you promised any other woman to marry her? And the guy doesn't know what to reply. So priest tells him what to reply. And then priest asks again, did you promise to any other bride to marry her? And now the guy knows how to reply, so he replies correctly. And then priest asks the bride if she agrees to marry this man, and priest sees that she may not answer correctly, and continues, and asks the same question, like, did you promise to any other man to marry him? And she replies, no, no, my dear priest. And now priest says, let's everyone pray to the God and let this couple be blessed. And just look at those faces. Do you see any happiness? You can see that interior of this church, as well as many other churches, is very posh. It is all thanks to donations, and because church doesn't pay any taxes. Look carefully now. It is very interesting. Priest says that you are getting married or getting engaged and presents 2 crowns, the so-called венцы in Russian. Then he hands those crowns to the man and a woman behind groom and the bride. Those people are witnesses of groom and the bride who witness this wedding ceremony. And remember, it is a sacred procedure. What kind of witnesses can be if it is sacred? And now those witnesses have to hold those crowns for about 20 or 25 minutes. And the priest says that by the name of God, I am pronouncing you like husband and wife, and I am marrying you. And he has to say it 3 times. And then he continues to read those prayers, but witnesses have to hold those crowns. Just take a look at those faces of witnesses and the husband and wife. Do you see any happiness? Witnesses are less happy because they have to hold those crowns for 20 or 25 minutes. Witness got asleep, that happens. Let's cut about 10 or 15 minutes of all these prayers. We see that one of witnesses changes hands because he is tired to hold that crown. Prayers continue. Priest asks for wisdom and to present wisdom to this newly born family. Then priest starts to read the Bible. He reads it for about maybe 5 minutes or maybe 7 minutes. Witnesses have to hold those crowns. And again, I don't see any happiness on the faces of husband and wife. Witnesses hold crowns, and priest prays again. And this is the most, maybe, let's say, happy part of this procedure, of this ceremony. Priest gives to drink wine to the husband and to the wife. But it's about 50 grams of wine. They have to do 3 sips each, and the cup should be drank all. Nothing should be left aside. By the look on those faces, they think, hey, why only a cup of wine? Give us the whole bottle, maybe 2 bottles, 1 for each. Now priest ties hands of husband and wife with a special towel, and they walk around the church, and even though crowns should be above their heads, you see that they are not. And take a look at the back. Everybody can enter the church at this time. You see doors opening, closing, people are entering the church, exiting the church, but that's a sacred ceremony, at least how church calls it. As they are walking, I don't see any happiness on their faces, and crowns are not following their heads, and as they walk by, ceremony continues. And let me tell you some words about this венчание and how much you would expect to pay if you would want to get married in church. As you may know, in church nothing is for free. This венчание, it is a sacred procedure actually. Sacred meaning that about this so-called ceremony a very limited amount of people should know, or at its best only the bride, the groom and the priest. But this never happens because people usually invite all their relatives, their friends, best friends, maybe some of their co-workers, and so on and so on. So the procedure becomes not sacred, even though church says that it's a sacred procedure. I don't know how it is done abroad, but in our churches you have to pay for everything, absolutely for everything. For such ceremony you would pay to the priest, then you would pay for rental of church for this 1 hour or 1.5 hours. You can see that there are some other priests that help the main priest, and there is a choir, about maybe 7 to 10 people to whom you should also pay. In villages, of course, there will not be any choir, but in big cities and in cities there will be a choir. And such ceremony in big cities might cost from around 200 to 500 and up, depending on how big is the city. In Moscow, maybe it would be something around $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000. But in villages, I think about $100 would be enough, because you pay only for the priest and maybe for one helper of the priest. In villages, usually there is no choir. And usually church asks also for additional donation, even though you pay for this ceremony, but they all like additional donation as well. Main ceremony with all these talkings and singings takes about 1 hour, and in my opinion it is not so interesting. Rather, I would say it is boring. It is a wedding, it should be a happy experience, but the way how it is presented and the way how they sing and how they talk, this priest I mean, if there was no bride with the groom, you would think that it's some kind of funeral, right? But no, it is a wedding ceremony. Keep watching for a couple of minutes more if you like this ceremony, and in a couple of minutes it will end, and we will see how sacred it is.
Дорогие новобрачные, Алексей и Ольга, сегодня завершилось таинство венчания, где видимым образом совершались молитвы, но невидимо Господь благословил и соединил ваши сердца на небесах. Это любовь определила ваше желание быть вместе, но надо возгоревать эту любовь, и она будет возрастать и возрастать. И вот тогда настоящая любовь будет крепкая, когда вам будет уже лет по 90, и вы не сможете друг без друга находиться какие-то там 10-15 минут. Вот. И вот такое возрастание любви, она будет укреплять ваш семейный союз. Если у вас будет терпение и молитва, обращение к Господу, то и жизнь ваша будет преображаться, и Господь дарует вам благословение на ваших будущих чад. Не забывайте своих родителей, потому что они отдали все, часть своей жизни, все необходимое, чтобы вы были счастливы, чтобы вы в здравии, в благополучии. Да и дальше будут они совершать молитвы и переживания и радоваться будут, если у вас все будет хорошо. Теперь в знак вашей...
Finally, priest takes away these candles and says that you can kiss each other and show how you will love each other forever. And as you can see, they are so bored that they kiss each other and don't even smile. Family icon is presented by a church, well, presented. It has been bought before the ceremony. And usually price of that icon in the church is about 30 to 50% higher than if you would buy it yourself. Ceremony is sacred, but priest says everyone can come and greet the newlyweds. And finally, priest presents the document and says that you never forget where you have been wed, when you have that wedding procedure in church, and what did you promise. And that's the only moment when I saw smiling husband and wife, only when they are exiting the church from this ceremony, when they are running away from here. If you have watched that wedding ceremony in church in full or partly, please look very carefully on the screen of your phone, tablet or a laptop, or maybe you're watching this on your TV. So watch very carefully on the screen where you're watching this right now. Are you watching carefully?
This is called a neuralizer. It's a gift from some friends from out of town. This red eye here will isolate the electronic impulses in your brains, more specifically the ones for memory.
Who are you? Really?
Really? I am just a figment of your imagination.
Let's now check your memories. What do you remember about wedding in church?
Отцу и Сыну и Святому Духу.
Ради Божий, Алексия, и ради Божий, Ольге. И спаси, помилуй, и сохрани нас, Боже, Твоею благодатью.
No good. Look on your screen again. Look very carefully. What about now?
Господу помолимся.
Better, but to be on the safe side, look again on the screen. Let's check your memories now. Ah, much better. That way is much better, right? Want to check out more of those memories? Okay, let's see. As I said before, венчание, which is wedding process in church, is a sacrament. It's a sacred procedure, one of sacred procedures of church. But even though it is sacred, there is a such procedure as cancellation of wedding in church. And in Russian there is a word, развенчание. I am not an expert on this, but this is possible in any church. And how is it possible? Let's see. So, when couple got married and then got married in church, and then after let's say couple of months, years, they get divorced. How do you cancel this wedding in church, which is a sacred procedure? Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. And how is it possible? Let's see. I found explanation of this process of cancellation of wedding in church on one of church websites. It is possible to cancel this wedding in church, but the process is very difficult and very long process, it says here. Why do you think it is a difficult and long process? Yes, correct. To get more money from you. So the process has to be cancelled by the same priest who was making that marriage procedure. And it says, if that priest is not available, or if you move to another city, you can go to absolutely any church. Amazing, huh? First stage is you have to talk to that priest who was making that church wedding procedure, and if it is not possible, then to the highest ranked church official that you can find. And you have to talk to that person to get a consultation, to get his blessing and to explain very carefully why you want to cancel that church wedding. And all that is needed to actually cancel it. Of course, you have to collect some documents and to present your divorce certificate, copy of document that was given to you when you were married in that church. Then you have to write a petition. You understand everything and you understand all the consequences. I don't know what consequences is, so you understand that you will go to hell or something. Yeah, I don't know. And then all those documents are sent to a higher ranked church. So not to the church where you went, to the church, let's say to head office of that church. How can you explain that you want to cancel that wedding process in church? You can say that your wife or your husband was having an affair, or you can say that woman made an abortion, so like your wife made an abortion and you didn't know anything about it, or you did not want her to make that abortion. In case your wife, like, or husband got a sexually transmitted disease, if wife or husband is a junkie or a complete alcoholic, or if you were hitting your wife all the time. So in such case, it is possible to get cancellation of that marriage. And it says here that you can get this wedding procedure in church for the second time, and for the third time, if you want to cancel like the second procedure, and if you want to get married in church for the third time, it is possible only if the person is widowed and that person has small children. So in all other cases it is not possible. But I think if you give like enough donation, then it is possible to make it for the third, fourth, fifth, sixth time, and so on and so on. So just everything depends on how much donation you give to the church. And that's it. And where do all your donations go? Maybe to buy some good houses for the priests, or maybe some good cars. They all like very, very good, expensive cars. About 7 or 8 years ago, before we had problems with Russia, journalists used to go to churches and film what kind of cars those priests and monks drive. Many of them have their own drivers, and cars are pretty expensive. Note, this video was shot about 8 or 9 years ago. And that's where all donations go. Servants of God, who has all the money in the world, ask for donations to drive such cars. And they have pretty good houses, even mansions. Just promise people who give all those donations that God will help those people. And get that money and buy these cars and build mansions. When this video was taken, these cars were about $80,000 to $100,000 each in Ukraine. But they are servants of God, so they should have good cars, right? When you go to church, everything costs money. And if your girlfriend is religious and if she wants this wedding procedure in church, I think it is just a waste of money. But everything is up to you, of course. I hope information in this video was useful to you and you found out information which you maybe have been seeking and wanted to ask somebody but didn't know whom to ask. Please let me know in comments below if you ever plan to have a wedding ceremony in church in Ukraine, Russia, or in any other Slavic country. Please tell me if this video has changed your opinion to get married in church, at least in Orthodox Church in Ukraine, Russia, or other Slavic country. Let's say if your future wife insists of getting married in church, would you agree, or maybe you would need to find some information not to agree on this ceremony? Please let me know in comments below. In the next part of this guide to engagement and wedding with a Ukrainian, Russian or Slavic lady, we will talk from where engagement rings came to Ukraine, when did it happen, and are they really popular or no. We will talk about traditions of engagement, how important they were, how important they are these days, and if you are lucky enough to meet an honest and trustworthy Ukrainian, Russian or Slavic woman, if she would really want you to buy her an engagement ring. Feel free to ask me questions in comments below about wedding and engagement in Ukraine and Russia that you would want me to answer briefly. And for those who need my help, assistance or advice, feel free to email me at my email address, and I always will be glad to help those people who need help. I wish you all good luck, success, joy, happiness, prosperity, and of course, stay healthy and wealthy.